Hey, Carl here for Homemade Strength. Today I'm going to show you how I make this thing. I called it a chin-up rack, I guess. It's to hold the weights so you can more easily load up a dip belt, whether for chin-ups or dips. And it just makes it easier to work with because this will hold the weight for you so you don't have to fuss with it when you're loading it up and putting the belt on and off. So I wanted to show you what it looks like so you have an idea of what we're doing. And now I'm going to show you how I made it. It's very similar to the weight plate storage rack that I made in a previous project. It's going to function the same way. It's just smaller. But it's basically the same concept. In the middle there is where your plates will be held. I made this particular one long enough to hold 4 plates. So the first thing you have to do is measure the thickness of one of your 45-pound plates, and then multiply that by however many plates you want this thing to hold. In my case, 4 plates. And so that measurement for me came out to 5 3/4 inches, but that might vary for you depending how thick your 45-pound plates are. So measure that yourself to be sure. But in my case, 4 plates came out to 5 3/4 inches. Added to that is going to be the width of a 2x4 on that side, width of a 2x4 on the other side. 2x4s are 3.5 inches. So that's going to be 7 inches. Again, measure your wood just to be sure. So 7 inches plus the 5 3/4 inches of my plate thickness. And then I added, I think, another 1/8 of an inch just for a bit of wiggle room. So that's how I came up with the length of those pieces. That's how you can do it. You need 2 boards cut to that length, whatever it may be for you. It was like 12 and just over 3/4 inches for me to hold 4 plates. Now the gap between them that I was measuring there, 7 inches is a good distance for that gap. And then again, it's going to be another 7 inches for the 2 widths of the 2x4s. 7 plus 7, that's going to be 14 inches for these other 4 boards. So 4 boards cut 14 inches long. The other 2, I explained how you get that length. So that's what you need. You can cut them from a single 8-foot 2x4 stud, assuming you don't make it too long. You can make it a little bit longer than I did and still get it out of a single stud. But this will hold 4 plates at least. Before there, you could see me, I squared it up just using a square rule, T-square, whatever you want to call it. If you didn't want to do that, I guess you could eyeball it. And then I didn't have screws long enough to reach all the way through, so I used a bigger drill bit and drilled down just a little bit so I could countersink my screws. And now I'm using a smaller bit just to pre-drill holes so that, just to ensure that I don't split the wood and to guide the screws in. I tend to like to do that. Just make sure that this bit, if you're going to pre-drill, make sure it's smaller than the threads on your screw. And then just put down some wood glue, arguably optional. This doesn't have to be the sturdiest thing in the world, but I put down some wood glue. And then what I like to do when I pre-drill holes, I put the screws in so just the tips stick out the backside, and then when you put it down on the other board, you can feel around and feel the tips of the screws fall into the holes, and that's how you know it's lined up, and then you can drill it down. And again, do the same thing with the other end. I won't show you that in the interest of saving time. Pretty simple so far. And now for the top board. Again, I'm just gonna drill a couple holes in the center portion and then drive a couple screws in there. And then again do it on the other side. If you have a drill that has variable speed, you should typically drill, if you're actually drilling with it, you should drill with that on high. And then if you're going to drive screws, set it to the lower setting. If you're drilling like countersink holes like that and you need a little bit of finesse there, use the low setting because it will drill slower. And then, of course, slather on some wood glue if you want. You certainly don't have to, but and then again, just go ahead and drive the screws in once you have it lined up. This is pretty much very similar construction to the weight plate storage rack that I made earlier, except it doesn't have sides and it's not as big, of course. So pretty simple there. I think it covered everything. You can sand it down if you wish, or at least dull the edges, the corners. That's all I did. You could paint it. And now we're going to show you this finished product in action again, and also show you how to make spacers. Not really need to make them, but you can see if you're only using one plate, you might want some spacers just to hold it more securely. You don't necessarily need it because it will kind of sit by itself, but for spacers I just used 2x4s and that worked out well. This other piece, this is an 1/8 inch thinner than the thickness of a 2x4, which is a 2x4 is 1.5 inches. And so that other thing I made by screwing two pieces of wood together, that was 1/8 inch less than a 2x4. But you don't necessarily need that. You might be able to get away with just 2x4s to make it simple. So you can see if you want to load up 2 plates, you can just slap in a couple 2x4s to hold them steady. You don't necessarily need that. Like I said, they will probably stay fine without that, but that's what I did. And you can see if you have 2 free hands, pretty easy to load up this stuff now when you don't have to hold the weights. Before I would kind of struggle with that because I would have to hold the weights up, I guess with my knees or shins while I thread the chain through, and then I figured this rack is a lot easier to work with. Now if you want a smaller plate, you'll notice you can just kind of rest it up there if you have the spacers in there and the holes line up nice and easily. So you can load those up easily too. So that's my idea, just to make working with this stuff with the dip belt a little bit easier. If you have any questions or comments, leave a comment on the blog. Thanks for watching.